Hi besties, welcome to Time Warp Wife Ministries. I'm your host Darlene Schacht, and today we'll be looking at chapter 3 in our Bible study on James. If you haven't got a copy of the study guide yet, it looks like this. You can find it on Amazon.com. It's called Living Faithfully, A Journey Through James. If for any reason you can't get a copy of the study guide, don't worry about that because we don't want anyone to miss out. Just simply go to our website at timewarpwife.com and you'll see a little subscription box there. Once you subscribe, you'll gain access to the members only section where you'll find this Bible study as well as several others that we've done in the past. So if you have your study guide with you, then open it up to chapter 3. And if you don't have it with you, go off and print your copy. And also let's open our Bibles to James chapter 3, and you might as well keep them open for this whole video because we'll be reading through it together. I'm reading from the NIV, but of course you can read from any version that you like. All right, so James 3 verses 1 to 12, we're gonna start there. It's about the dangers of an unbridled tongue. That's a really good topic. All right, not many of you should become teachers, my fellow believers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly. We all stumble in many ways. Anyone who is never at fault in what they say is perfect, able to keep their whole body in check. When we put bits in the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we can turn the whole animal. Or take ships as an example. Although they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder wherever the pilot wants to go. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body, sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. All kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and sea creatures are being tamed and have been tamed by mankind, but no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison. With the tongue, we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse human beings who have been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth come praises and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this should not be. Can both fresh water and salt water flow from the same spring? My brothers and sisters, can a fig tree bear olives or a grapevine bear figs? Neither can a salt spring produce fresh water. Turning to our study guide now, I'm just going to read a portion of what I wrote on page 45. But the things that come out of a person's mouth come from the heart, and these defile them. This verse reminds us that taming the tongue begins within our hearts and works its way out. We need to put down our pride and control our anger before it rolls off our tongue. So there's a question on page 47 that I'd like to discuss. It says, can you recall a situation where holding your tongue led to a better outcome? How did this decision affect your situation? And my answer to that is that I found not one specific situation, but as Michael and I have grown together over 35 years, we have both found that holding our tongues is just so much better than complaining about the other person. Some of the ways that I've seen this in action is, say Michael spends a lot of money on something because he's working on a project. You know, I notice, wow, he spent a lot of money. I can see that on the Visa bill. Not sure what to think about this, but I don't really need to say anything because I know that he already knows that he spent a lot of money in this case. So I just hold my tongue. And then what I find is that Michael will often come up to me and he'll say, hey, thanks for not saying anything about what I spent. I know that it was a lot of money and I really appreciate that you didn't complain about that. Wow. And lately I've been working on a dollhouse, and I have to tell you, like, on the other side of this camera, what you can't see here is like all of my dollhouse stuff. It's just been out constantly because I'm using so many things when I'm working on my projects. Right now he is working on our basement, so everything we have is just kind of out of control, and I have nowhere to put my craft supplies. So they've just been in our kitchen constantly when I'm working on the dollhouse, and he doesn't say a peep about it. And I'm thinking some days this must really drive him crazy. But I am so appreciative to him for not saying anything. And I think that his silence just speaks so much louder than his complaining could, because I know that it's a problem, and I know that I need to clean this up, and I'll probably be doing that tonight. But just the fact that he was able to control his thoughts on that, even though it might be frustrating to him when he's trying to look for a pair of scissors and they're buried under all of my floral supplies here, and he's not saying anything to me. I just think, this man is strong. This man is just incredible. And I love him for that. I love that I see him growing in grace and in strength and in patience. And it's just a wonderful thing. And I pray to God that I am growing in the same way. And I think that learning to tame your tongue is, just kind of like the evidence of that. It is the evidence of our patience and our inner strength and our wisdom. There is so many things that go into taming our tongue. If we're just going to be hot-headed and lose our temper at the drop of a hat, well, we're not being patient there. We're not being forbearant. We're not really being considerate or loving. There's so many things that are wrong with losing our temper and just speaking out. And isn't it interesting? I'm finding that James kind of has this theme running throughout the book about our deeds and also our words and being angry and the words that we speak. It's all kind of coming together, I think, because this is so important to our Christian life. How are we acting? What message are we giving the world? Is it starting at home? And if it is, then also, is it now spreading out to the world? Are we being kind and considerate to others? Are we holding our tongue when someone cuts us off in traffic? Now, holding our tongue can also be holding our gestures. If someone cuts us off and we're just like, oh, we're so angry at them that we're honking, or we're, pointing at them, or, other things. I'm not even going to say it, but yeah, if we are just not controlling our tongue as well as our emotions, we're not really giving a good picture of who Christ is, because our character needs to be reflecting God's character in every possible way that it can. And holding our tongues is just one of the ways that we do show the kindness and the forbearance of God. Let's move on to our next section, which is verses 13 to 18. Here we go. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder in every evil practice. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. I noticed something here as I was reading that, and I think I have addressed it here. Let me see. Yes, I have. So let's start reading in the book on page 49. It says, in chapter 2, James emphasized the relationship between faith and deeds, illustrating that actions go hand in hand with our faith. But here he is taking a step further in this chapter by examining the attitude of our hearts, pointing out that selfish ambition and envy are both earthly and unspiritual. The attitude of our heart is just as important as the actions themselves. Remember how we talked about being inclusive to others, and if you have a clique and you're more comfortable hanging around with those people, you should be open to inviting someone else. I think that this part really speaks to the position of our heart as we do that. You know, if we are inviting others into our group and we are being kind and considerate to them, are we doing it because we want to look good to others? Are we doing it because we feel that it's just our duty to do so? Or are we truly compassionate and loving and full of grace and living the way that God wants us to live? Because that is so important. I read this, but I want to read it again. The attitude of our heart is just as important as the actions themselves, if not more so. And that just really speaks to me here too, because, you know, we can show our faith by our deeds. We might write a big check and hand it over to someone, but are we really giving out of sacrifice? And that's something else that comes from within too. Are we giving out of the abundance of our heart or out of the abundance of our wallet? So let's keep reading here. Both our words and our deeds should align with the wisdom that comes from above, which James describes this way. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. That reminds me of the video we had in the first week where we talked about righteous anger and how it needs to go through that funnel of faith. Now we're seeing here that our deeds should be going through that same funnel of faith. In a way, James is talking about the same thing. That wisdom from heaven is peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy, and good fruit. Proverbs 16:12 tells us, all a person's ways seem pure to them, but motives are weighed by the Lord. People do good work for all kinds of reasons. They volunteer at church, give to the poor, and help those in need. The question we need to ask ourselves is, what is the motive behind my actions? Are they driven by selfish ambition and pride, a desire for recognition, or the love of money? Or are they motivated by a genuine love for God? I remember a time when I volunteered at a Christian conference, and the reason I volunteered is because I knew that the guy that I had a crush on, this was before I was married, the guy that I had a crush on was also volunteering there. So I wanted to do that. And then of course I felt really good about myself. You know, I'm one of the ushers at this conference. And there's just one example of why we can do good for the wrong reasons. And so we really need to keep our hearts in check and make sure that if we examine ourselves and we say, hey, why am I doing this? And it is for the wrong reasons, if it's to show others how good that we are, how rich that we are, how powerful we are, you know, I'm going to do this because I'm such a great person. We need to really examine our hearts and start saying, I want to do this because God is such a wonderful God. And that's the reason that we should be doing everything that we do. Not for the recognition for ourselves, but because of who He is and the goodness that comes from Him. Because every good thing that we do is from God. Every good and perfect gift, including the good things that we do, is only because He's enabling us to do them. He's giving us the opportunity to do them. It's all God. And when we start to see our lives that way, that everything good is really from God, it's not about us, then we can start looking at people and looking at situations in a different way, and we become a lot more loving and compassionate. And what were those words again that James was using? He was saying pure, peace-loving, considerate, submissive. Submissive is so good. That means that we are, I look at submission saying that we are lowering ourselves for a mission. And that's what submission always means to me. I kind of break that word up now. And so we're lowering ourselves as we are raising up others, and as we are most of all raising up Christ so that he might be glorified in our lives. And that should always be our mission. So that is why we do our deeds in submission. Okay, now there's a question. How does Jesus' example of washing the disciples' feet, including those who would betray or deny him, challenge our approach to serving others? Here's an example. I was sitting and having coffee with a friend the other day, and she was telling me about how they are no longer going to be seeing a certain person because she's very nasty. She's difficult to them. She's giving them a very hard time. And what I said to her is, if we're only being nice to people who are nice to us, that's easy. What the difficult part is whether or not we can be nice to people who are unkind to us. My attitude is that my home is open at all times, regardless of how somebody might act toward me, whether they are nasty or mean. I really can't think of a single person in this world who I would not open my door to and say, hey, come on in and have coffee and let's chat. Invite them to my table because I want to win that person to Christ. Of course, we're not going to invite somebody into our home who is a danger to our children or a danger to us. That's not the kind of thing that I'm talking about here. I'm just talking about loving people regardless of what they have said or done to us, regardless of how we might feel. Because if we are feeling really negative toward them, then maybe we can ask God, Lord, please show me ways that I can love them like you love them. Show me ways that I can show them love. Show me ways that I can pray for them or reach out to them because, Lord, I want to be a servant like Jesus was, who was willing to wash the feet of Judas. And when you really stop to think about that, that is incredibly heartbreaking that he knew this man was going to betray him. He knew that he would be going to the cross that very night. And what he was doing there is exemplifying the love of his Father, whether Jesus felt like it or not in that moment. And I know that sometimes we don't feel like it, but we do it because of our love for God. And I'm thinking he probably did feel like it because he had such love and compassion for people. But sometimes we don't. Sometimes we just don't have that kind of love and compassion that we should, and especially to people who are incredibly nasty toward us. But we can really take a lesson from Jesus, who knelt down and he washed all of those dirty feet, regardless of what they were going to do or what they might have already done or how sinful they were. And he was willing to show the love of his Father in that moment, which is such an incredible example to us. So that is all that we have for chapter 3. So I will leave it there and I will see you next week for chapter 4. So don't forget, if you haven't got a copy of the study guide, you can go to Amazon right now and pick one up. It's called Living Faithfully, A Journey Through James. We will talk to you later. See you next week, actually. So goodbye.